Welcome, everybody. My name is Pete Saracino. I hail originally from Seneca Falls, New York. I'm in an area about 15 minutes west of there, south of Phelps, the village of Phelps, New York. I like to tell people I live in suburban Phelps. It's around a little hamlet called Oaks Corners. I am a retired science educator from the Marcus Whitman School District, which comprises the towns of Rushville and Gorham and Middlesex, a little bit south of Geneva, New York. And in my years there, I was also an adjunct professor at Finger Lakes Community College, and I taught astronomy, meteorology, and earth science. I retired. It's getting hard to remember how long ago it was. I can't believe how fast the years go. I think it was 9, maybe going on 10 now. And when I was in grad school years ago, of course, being from Seneca Falls, New York, I was at Antioch, New England, and we had to do professional internships, 2 of them. And living real close to Montezuma, I went out there one day and said, geez, can I do an internship here as an educator? And they said, yeah. So I did it. I loved it. When I graduated, I worked there as a full-time educator when the Fish and Wildlife Service thought it was a really good idea to have full-time educators. They have since thought better of it, so I got into public school teaching. When I retired, I wanted to do some volunteer work, and I thought I'd end up in a soup kitchen or something like that. And I hadn't been out to Montezuma in years, and I went out there, and it just felt like I was going home. So I said, can I volunteer? And they said, yeah. And ever since then, I've been a volunteer naturalist educator out there, mostly during migration when things are really cooking. And I'm a bird surveyor once a week there. And I also have, through Cornell Cooperative Extension of Ontario County, I've been doing for about a year now. It's going on the second year, Young Birders Club. And we go all over the place trying to give them experiences of the natural world and birds. And as of this summer, I am a newly minted master naturalist. So I'm going to begin the presentation with a question. Where can I look for a sign of spring, even in the dead of winter? This is talk about early signs of seasonal change, and I give interpretive walks at the refuge in the fall and early winter, and before we close, and along the Seneca River in Waterloo. And I always love to pull this on people. Where can I look for a sign? Spring is already giving us. Let me get my things to my notes. Spring has already given us a promise of a promise, even in the dead of winter. And I'd like you to just think about what that might be just for a moment before I spring it on you. So it's not a fruit and it's not a flower. It's a bud, right? Late summer, early fall, they start forming, and they're there all winter long waiting for days like today, or as the sun gets higher, we'll talk about that in a moment, and the days get longer and there's more solar heating, they just respond, buds and blooms, and but they are prepared. So I like to give people hope that even in the dead of winter, nature has given us a promise of a promise that there will be a spring. And sometimes I like to go out in it isn't happening this year, of course, as you all know, but I like to go out on the coldest, wildest February night and close my eyes and think of a July day. And sometimes I like to go out on a July day and remind myself that there's going to be such a thing as winter too. But nature is kind of saying, hang in there. Okay, now another question. Where is the best place to look for the first sign of seasonal change and why? No, I'm going to give you what I feel is the best answer to this in a little bit, but I'd like you to think about that just for a second. I know you're all naturalists and you love the earth and you probably go on your own hikes yourself, but where would be the best place to look for the first sign of seasonal change and why? You don't have to write that in a chat or anything, but just think about it. See if you agree with me when the time comes. Okay, some confessions are in order. True confessions. Number 1, my interest in the natural world is primarily aesthetic rather than scientific. If I was exiled on that desert island, my books would be ones of poetry and natural history rather than those of science. I'm drawn to nature's ability to excite both the imagination and the spirit. I've been doing a lot of reading and studying about nature lately, and some of the authors is really beginning to be a synthesis between the scientific way of knowing and the intuitive kind of spiritual way of knowing, and I think they can profoundly inform each other. So the knowledge of science I've learned along the way is a prerequisite, as the old catechisms used to say, for love. It used to be way, way back in St. Pat's School in Seneca Falls, New York, and we had the Baltimore Catechism, and they always talked about the fact that you can't love what you don't know. So you got to know. And in my walks with people, I really try to make connections so they can begin to know and therefore love. And if they can love, they can begin to cherish. Some caveats are in order. My choices are purely subjective. I'm sure you have a list of your own favorites. The list is not exhaustive. My choices represent but a portion of what is available to the curious naturalist at this time of year. I offer no specific dates, as these sightings may vary considerably with latitude, altitude, and time of year. But that's the whole point, right? Marking time by events in nature, not by pages on a calendar. In some years, many of the things I'm going to show you can be experienced even prior to the equinox, at least in my neck of the woods. In this final note, according to the U.S. Global Climate Research Program, average annual temperatures in the Northeast have risen by 2 degrees, with winter temperatures rising twice as much. Thus, the phenology or timing of natural events may very well alter as the years go on, and this has been a weird late winter right now. I mean, I'm seeing dead skunks on the road. I'm seeing bluebirds checking out nesting boxes. I have snowdrops blooming right now. I was telling Chrissy before that I volunteer at the Rose Sanctuary out in Nebraska, and usually the peak time is mid to late March out there for the greatest influx of sandhill cranes, and they're already starting to see some right now. So who knows what's in store for us? Okay. The word promise in the title suggests hope, and my presentation is about the hope I experience as I search for the very first intimations nature offers to alert us to the fact that winter is slowly surrendering to spring. It's a less scientific look at nature, but in some ways a focus on the more humane ways of encountering the natural world. Now, I've listened to a lot of stuff, wonderful presentations on the Naturalist Exchange, ticks and bacteria and wood frogs and leaf litter and bees and dormancy in trees, and they're wonderful and they're just so knowledgeable. But this is a little different. This is not so much scientific as it is just a little hike through natural history. I love this saying by Robin Wall Kimmerer, I think I'm saying that last name right. I have trouble with it. The transcendent ordinary. What may appear to be very, very ordinary, when you really start looking and loving, can be a gateway into other things. Okay, so this one quote I got from a wonderful book, Wetlands: The Web of Life. In order to capture the essence of beauty of nature, there must be an intimacy with it, not as an object, but as a process that is forever changing. The more you learn to see nature, to observe it with a quality of attention that is crucial to seeing, the more one is able to create works of art. And I was just reading a book, Gathering Moss by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and there's a great line where she says, attentiveness alone can rival the most powerful magnifying glass. I'd like to repeat it. Attentiveness alone can rival the most powerful magnifying glass. So this is all about going out and paying attention and the importance of it. But you can see, I'm sure you guys are all attuned to this. But poet that I am, I'm going to start with a poem. I want you to read along with me to yourself as I read it. It's about the importance of paying attention. At least that's one of the things I get from it. So here we go. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass. The one who's eaten sugar out of my hand. Who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. Who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is your plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And I'm sure a lot of you know the author of that beautiful poem, The Summer Day, Mary Oliver, who I really, really love. So this is about my attempts and what I do and look for and smell for and see when I'm trying to follow her advice and practice knowing, okay? Where I try. So we're going to go about some sounds, vocal and non-vocal, the birds make. Some plants that are early bloomers, brave the cold, like the snowdrops right outside my window that bloomed Friday, I think. I looked down coming back from the gym and I went, whoa. Feeding calls and other signs some animals leave behind. Some early rising insects I look for. Some amphibians I call early quackers. I'm sure they're probably old friends to you. And even an early basking reptile. And the night sky. In the night sky itself and along the horizon. Now, I want to show you a picture. It isn't off topic, but I'm sure you'll know exactly what this woman is feeling when you see it. This time of year, you're doing dishes, you're out doing yard work, you're going to the store, whatever, and even unawares, you feel a little lift in your spirit and in your mind and in your step because just the quality of sunlight. And I think that's what this woman is doing. You know, it's still winter, but God, you look outside and it's 6 o'clock at night and it's still light and you're saying, oh, it's almost a sigh of relief and a little bit of weight taken off your shoulders. So the bad news tonight is you are stuck with a former earth science teacher, but the good news is that you're stuck with a former earth science teacher. So I just wanted to do this real quick to tell why what's happening outside is happening. And there's a little model I used to use with my students. With your non-writing hand, if you will, make a fist. That's going to be your sun. And if you make your hand's going to be the earth, and you're going to go around the sun like that, okay? This is not the scale. When I did planet walks with my students, I would shrink the sun to the size of a basketball, and on that scale, the earth would be a peppercorn. Probably about, I don't know, I can't remember now, 27 yards away, something like that. But you make one journey around the sun, 365 and a quarter days, that's a year. When I send birthday cards out, I'm always fond of saying, here's to another trip around the sun. And people kind of pause, and then I think they get it. But what I want you to know is as the earth goes around the sun, and you can do this with your hand, it isn't perpendicular to the plane of its own orbit. This is how it would look if it was perpendicular, straight up and down as it went around. You probably learned this long ago in grammar school, but it's tilted off of the perpendicular by 23.5 degrees. So it's tilted as it goes around, right? Not only that, no matter where it is in its journey around, this is very important, it's crucial, it's pointing in the same direction. If it's here in December, pointing that way out in space. If it's here in March, it's pointing that way out in space. If it's here in June, it's pointing that way. September, it's pointing that way. And you can go out at night on a clear night and see exactly, just about exactly, it's still honing in on this place, but you can see where it's pointing to. And you use the Big Dipper to do that, okay? So here's the Big Dipper, here's the handles, the stars of the handle. Here's the bowl stars, this one, this one, this one, and this one. An ancient test of eyesight used to be, if you can see 2 stars right there, it's a horse and the rider, Mizar and Elcor, and if you could see that with unaided eyes, you're supposed to have a good eyesight. But getting back to the bowl stars, the 2 outer stars on the bowl are going to point to Polaris, the North Star, right here. And this is a circumpolar constellation, no matter as long as it's dark enough to see it, it's never out of your sight. You know, those 2 outer stars are always going to point to the North Star. And the entire sky is going to revolve around that point. It'll rise in your east, go behind you, and set in your west. And that star will never move. And that's where the spin axis of the earth is just about pointed now. A lot of Native American tribes call that the star that does not walk, because it would stay in place as the whole sky rotated. Now, this is a little off topic, but I just wanted to tell you real quick because it's so cool. And in my walks, I love to make connections between science and culture and history. There's a beautiful story related to this where fugitive slaves in the days of the Underground Railroad very often had to travel at night, and how were they going to make sure they were going in the right direction? There's an old spiritual folk song called "Follow the Drinking Gourd." I want to read you from my notes. It says, an African American spiritual about how Peg Leg Joe, operative of the Underground Railroad, would guide fugitive slaves north to freedom by following directions in this musical map. Legend says Joe passed as a laborer and spread the song to different plantations. And one of the lines from the song is, for the old man is waiting for to carry you to freedom, follow the drinking gourd. If you go on YouTube and just type that song and you get about 5 or 6 different covers of it. It's really, really cool. But that's where it's pointing right now. So back to here, it's always pointing in the same direction. So over here, let's start right here, June 21st. It's leaning in toward the sun relative to the sun because of that point. And the northern hemisphere is getting the lion's share of the heat, and the southern hemisphere isn't. And if you make a fist right now and just put your hand straight up to it, and start pointing the top toward the sun, you can't point the top in without pointing the bottom out. Or conversely, if you point the bottom in, the top goes out. And that's what's happening here. Because of the tilt of the earth, when we're in this position, the rays of the sun are more direct. When we get over to this position, the September equinox, we're still pointing in that direction, but relative to the sun, we're not leaning in or out. It's mostly 12 hours a day, night all over the earth. When we get over here, because we're pointing there, now the southern hemisphere is leaning in, we're leaning out, and that's why we have winter. And then we come to March, right? So what happens is, the higher the sun is, the more we lean in, the sun gets higher, and the higher the angle is. Higher angle means more intense heating. This little slide, I like this slide. If you get a direct hit of 90 degrees, that's going to heat up about 1 mile here. This is from here to here is 1 mile. But the more you angle the sun, the same amount of light is asked to do more work, and it can't. And I used to show my kids this. It's very easy. Get a flashlight and a white piece of paper, turn the flashlight on, point it straight up and down, and just draw a circle around the beam it makes, and you'll see how intense and small it is. And the minute you start angling that light, that beam starts to spread right out. You haven't taken batteries out of it. You haven't added more batteries. It's just the angle is not as intense, and the heating isn't as intense. The same amount of light is being asked to heat up a greater amount of space. So that's why we have winter back here. When we're leaning back, the angles are smaller. Let me show you this. I researched this for my walks in Waterloo, but on June 21st, when the northern hemisphere is leaning in the most, 23.5 degrees north is getting a 90-degree hit from the sun. In Waterloo, New York, on that same day at noon, when the sun is highest in the sky, our angle at noon is 70.5 degrees. On the equinoxes, it's 48 degrees at noon. And on the first day of winter, 12/21, it is 24 degrees. So that's what happens, and the heat increases, the decreases, and the seasons happen. One more slide here. This is something a science teacher, another science teacher, myself made in our backyard. It is, I call it a medicine wheel, but we use it for backyard astronomy. This line here is due north, this pumpkin. This pumpkin here is due south. That pumpkin here is due east, and that pumpkin here is due west. And we use the Naval Observatory to lay this out. And this line right here is sunrise on the summer solstice. And the sun will rise like this, arc around to the south, get as high as it's going to get for the year, come back down here and set right there. First day of fall and spring, it rises there. It goes this way, comes back around, and sets there. And then the first day of winter, it's way down here. The arc is real lower, and then it sets over here. So from my bathroom window upstairs, I can just watch the sun moving between these two extremes as the year goes on, and I'm alerted to the fact that there's seasonal change going on. So the first day of winter, 12/21, it'll be right here. And little by little, every day, it's making its way this way. When it got to Groundhog's Day, February 2nd, it was about halfway between the two. First day of spring, it'll be there. Rises further and further north of east. May Day, May 1st, it's about there. Keeps rising further north of east until it rises as far north of east as it's going on the first day of summer. And then little by little, just makes its way back. That's about August 1st. That's a September equinox. You go this way, this is Halloween, halfway between. And this is first day of winter. Okay. And I just love to watch that. It's one of the things I watch from my bathroom window. You can't see the horizon because these trees are in the way. But I'll tell you, for instance, on the equinoxes, once the sun, and any of these days, once the sun clears these trees, and it's not very high in the sky, and you trace its path back to where it rose, it's pretty accurate and really, really cool. Okay, so I want to show you this now, okay? We talked about what is the very first place to see the very first sign of spring, and I hope you came up with your own ideas. This is mine, okay? On a clear night in early February, in fact, you can see this tonight. Look east around 9 p.m. for a large curve formation of stars that looks a bit like a backwards question mark or sickle. You see this right here? This is a constellation, Leo the Lion, and the very first sign of spring. The equinox may be nearly 2 months later, but with the rising of Leo, there can be no turning back. The switches have been thrown on the great engine of the seasons, and everywhere in the woods and the fields, the small, often unnoticed natural events that make up the early part of the season are beginning to fire off. So for me, that's the very first sign. Now, there was a why to it. Why? And my why is, as you know, natural events on Earth are notoriously unpredictable. If you made a date, kept track of the day the first snowdrop bloomed, or the first robin came back, or the first skunk cabbage came up, whatever, it would probably vary from year to year, but you can take it to the bank. The night sky is not like that. And people have relied on that fact for centuries. I want to show you something here. I hope I can toggle between these. I don't know why I can't. Let me see here. Your screen. Here we go. Okay, do share. So this is the night sky right now. It's probably about, let me see. Ooh, I don't want that. It's about 21, so 8, 9, it's about what, 9 o'clock? And if you look east here, I want to show you, here's Leo. Here's a backwards question mark or sickle. Here's the body of the lion right here. Back here, this right triangle is like the rear end of the lion, and this is its tail. I'm going to take those lines off and see if you can see it. There's a backwards question mark. This is really big in the sky. It's not hard to see it off. You get a nice clear view of the eastern horizon, and you can watch it rise every night. Here's a body like this rectangle right here. And then this right triangle back here is its tail. And that's Leo the lion right there. That's a very, very, very first sign in the night sky. Now, what's really interesting too is I'm going to switch over to here, go past, go to the west, and here's Orion here. But a little bit up and to the right of Orion is Taurus, the bull. And, you know, most of these constellations don't look anything like they're called, but this might be his horn right here, and this might be another horn. This might be a leg, and this might be another leg, and he's kind of charging toward Orion. This V-shaped cluster of stars here is an open cluster called the Hyades, forms the face of the bull. And this big old bright star is the alpha star in Taurus called Aldebaran, which is an Arabic word for follower of the Pleiades. From the days when Arabic was the language of astronomy. The Pleiades will rise, and about an hour later, Aldebaran will rise and follow the Pleiades across the sky. But here, it's a winter constellation. Leo is one of the first constellations of the spring, and as it rises earlier and earlier every night, it stands to reason that Taurus sets earlier and earlier, okay? So I want to get back to my slide here. I want to show you some things. I call this a battle of the titans. It's a lion fighting a bull. There's another depiction of it. Lion versus the bull. And even on a coin. Now, there's an emerging science called archaeoastronomy, which is a melding of astronomy and archaeology and anthropology. And what they try to do is figure out what ancient people knew about the night sky and how they put that knowledge to use. And some of them interpret, this is on a lot of old vases they unearthed too, this battle. And how they interpret it very often is the spring constellation Leo slowly slaying the winter constellation Taurus. The lion is defeating the bull, spring is returning to the earth. I think that's probably really cool. So that's the night sky, and now we're going to get on to some things closer to the surface of the earth. I'm going to start with birds now. Great horned owls are courting. I was visiting my daughter in Richmond, Massachusetts, in the Berkshires just last week, and these guys were hooting up a storm outside. The males will be a little bit deeper than the females, but they get going pretty early. I've read where they are able to incubate eggs successfully down to negative 27 degrees Fahrenheit. And when I checked in the Breeding Bird Atlas of New York State, the second one, the earliest record of them being on eggs is January 22nd. The earliest record of nestlings is February 15th. And the earliest record of fledglings is March 21st. So if you go out, take the garbage out at night, going out to the car, or whatever you're doing, it's very common to start hearing this. Barred owls are courting now. You might hear the who cooks for you all, and supposedly too. What I read is males and females engage in duets and other vocalizations like cackles, hoots, caws, and gurgles. So if you're lucky enough to be out some night, or if you go on an owl prowl, this time of year is a really good time to hear that. This is a red-phrased eastern screech owl. They're beginning to court. The call is an eerie, descending whinny, followed by a long, mellow whistle trill, with the female voices slightly higher than the males. I'm hearing on the Cuba listserv, too, the birdie listserv, that people are starting to hear saw-whet owls tooting. This is something I love. It's really subtle, but when I'm doing the dishes at night or just watching the feeder in the morning, and it may be a snowy morning, unlike this year, and I'm watching the goldfinches at the thistle feeder, and little by little, the males are just starting to yellow up, and it is so heartening to me to just begin to see that. You know, the equinox is a few weeks away, and of course, the full-blown spring of the layman is really weeks away, but this is a little sign that things are beginning to change. I love it. This guy I heard today going into the gym singing this song. Though both male and female cardinals sing the year round, the sound of the weet, weet, weet whistles, followed by its wit, wit, wit notes in late winter and early spring, is for me a much anticipated and welcome sign of the changes to come. And just the beauty. I had 3 male cardinals in the lilac bush right out my window last night, just sitting there as the night was falling. It was really beautiful. These guys, the winter song is a chickadee-dee-dee, of course, but lengthening days stimulate hormone production, initiates breeding behavior. And their phoebe song consists of 2 whistles, each a half a second long, with second whistle lower pitched than the first. And I'm even starting to hear that, and it's comforting. These guys, tufted titmice, declare the start of winter's end with a quickly delivered up to 11 times in succession, Peter, 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 alerting us of the fact that the extended social negotiations of courtship have begun. And occasionally the female will sing a softer version of the song. I have heard this already too. A sign of things to come, things in transition. These guys, a sorrowful lament of unmated male doves, is an early sign of seasonal change I listen for. Named for their plain of coo, coo, coo song is now used to attract a mate. And that's a really nice picture of just showing that it's spring is about to spring, but hasn't yet, and they're getting ready. I looked out my window Sunday morning talking to a friend, and the lilac bush, it's a big one, right outside my kitchen window, was full of these guys already. These birds often arrive when it's still quite cold with snow still on the ground. Nice flat I said that the male's conclavity is a welcome sound to the winter weary ear. The females haven't arrived yet, but a nice story about this too. I was going to the gym one day a couple years ago and was getting in the car, and the trees on my property were surrounded with mixed flocks of grackles and redwings and cowbirds and starlings. And I said, I'm not feeding you guys. You leave me out of house and home. Then I thought better of it. I said, well, they're all God's creatures. What the heck? And I fed them and I went to the gym. And I came back and I went in the house and I looked out at the feeding stations. And sure enough, it was a feeding frenzy. And to my utter amazement, on one of the tray feeders was a yellow-headed blackbird. And I said, whoa, I wonder if that was a thank you. This was a surprise for me one time. I was driving around the countryside looking for early spring migrants, and there was a freshly plowed field full of manure and a lot of horned larks in it. And I heard this tinkling way high up in the sky, and I looked, and this bird was doing a sky dance that rivaled the woodcock. It's really, really cool. I didn't know what I was seeing. I had to research it when I got home. But it was really, really cool, really, really heartening, and I didn't know they did it. And I wonder if that's where you get the name Skylark. Okay, some non-vocal sounds. As I go out, to do yard work or fill the feeders or whatever, I'm starting to hear downy and hairy woodpeckers pecking. Bursts of steady drumming on trees to define territories and attract mates. The larger hairy's drumming is more rapid with longer pauses between bursts of sound. Both males and females drum year-round, but most intensely during their courtship and early nesting season, which begins in March. Eggs won't be laid till May, but drumming begins now and is especially evident on calm, sunny days. I was hearing it just the other day. Who hasn't gone out to see the nuptial flight of the woodcock, right? In addition to that buzzy ground painting, he has a non-vocal component added to his courtship display. Spiraling skyward, his wings make a twittering sound as air passes between the three outer primaries. And of course, the vocal sound is the chirping on its way down. And I put this one here because very often I go out searching for good sites to see this display, and very often I find sites that the background is such that I can't pick out the bird in the air coming back down, but I can hear all these sounds. Once in a while, I'm fortunate enough and I can see the whole thing from top to bottom. But I have a real funny story. When I was a grad student at Antioch, New England, up near a little bit north of Keene, New Hampshire, my friend and I were watching the display one night, and a conservation officer, a woman down the street called us in, and he came down. He said, what are you two fellas up to? And I said, well, we're watching the nuptial flight of a male woodcock. I said, listen, and the bird started peeing. And he listened, and he said, oh, I always thought that was spring peepers. He said, well, I guess you guys are on the level, and he let us go. There's a finish to that story I'll tell you in a few slides. Pretty funny one. When we are doing winter raptor surveys in late winter, very often when we're close to a big wet field nearby, we can hear the winnowing sounds of snipe. Air rushing over a snipe's outspread tail feathers creates a hoo-hoo-hoo winnowing sound. The sound is made while the bird is diving in the air towards the ground during courtship displays. Really, really cool. Who hasn't heard a rough grouse drumming? Is that a lawnmower starting up in the woods? No, that thumping sound is part of a courtship display of the male grouse. The drums are a series of progressively faster thumps created by air rushing to fill the vacuum created beneath the wings as he rapidly flaps them in front of his body. I was out last spring with a friend looking for early migrants, and we heard that. And at first we didn't. And we said, we know what that is. Already on the listserv, the Cougar Birds listserv, people are reporting bluebirds coming back to check nest boxes. It's something I always look for. They often return in March to their nesting areas where bare ground is becoming exposed and the first insects are emerging. The birds may inspect nest boxes and leave only to return again and then disappear again. These comings and goings may be related to food availability and proximity of the boxes. But just the color on a winter day in late February, early March, where you haven't seen color in a long time, can be powerful medicine, I think. That's a beautiful picture right there. And lest we forget, these guys, Some are permanent residents, with the migrants often return before the last of the snows and must rely on berries, sumac, and other fruit until nature provides. This more than all the other ones might be the one for me. I still remember my first one of my first contacts with the natural world. I had to be 8 or 9 years old, and outside of my house in Seneca Falls, there was a maple tree, probably about 30 feet high. And a mother robin would build a nest in there, and I would climb as a little boy that nest, and I'd get way up there to look in to see the eggs, and that mother would come back and peck my head. My mother would run out terrified. You're gonna break your neck. Get down. And dutifully I would, but when I saw that the babies had hatched, when I heard them, I would go back up again, and then I would sneak a peek, and the mother would peck my head, and my own mother would come back out and say, "You're gonna break your neck." I think I was probably a lot safer then than if I tried that now. And just the sight of that red breast. Sometimes in winter raptor surveys, we see some of the winter birds, and that red breast is heartening even in the dead of winter. Okay, now on to some mammals. Red fox. My wife and I will be watching TV, and outside there's a scream like somebody's being murdered. You probably all heard it. During breeding season, you can actually, the male's urine takes on a strong skunk-like odor. You can detect it. Sometimes I do when I'm out for a walk. Vocalizations include a sharp terrier-like bark from woods and fields, and a high-pitched, prolonged screaming by the female, designed to travel long distances and attract the mate. The call is also made actually during the act, and males can make it too. These guys, male woodchucks may emerge, look for dirt scattered on snow around the entrance to their hole, or muddy trail left when it goes in search of a female to mate with. And I'm pretty sure at this time of year, with all due respect to Puxatawny Phil, they're not bothered with the shadow or the lack thereof, but they may be seen. Eastern chipmunk. In March, males emerge from winter torpor in search of receptive females. You may see or hear them engaging in mock battles with other males. Females emerge a few weeks later, and the mating begins. And you can really believe winter is really going to come to an end. These guys, I saw a dead one in the road just the other day. Peak breeding season is mid-March. You may smell or see tracks in the snow may alert you to their presence as males seek out females. There's a wonderful poem by Robert Frost called The Last Word of a Bluebird, where he wrote it to his daughter Leslie when she was little. And it's a real cold night, and the bluebird comes and says, "Look, it's too cold. I gotta scoot, but tell Leslie I'll be back in the spring. And you're gonna know when the time is just about there. Tell her to look for skunk tracks in the snow with an axe." The last word of a bluebird. Now on to the plant world. I took this picture this year, January 6th, on the Ontario County pathways near Phelps, New York. They produce heat while growing, allowing it to push up through the ice and snow and also prevent their own tissue from freezing. Early flowering provides foods to early insects like carrion beetles, flesh flies, blowflies, while also evidently serving as a warming hut for these insects. And in my research, I found out that 11 species of spiders are known to seek prey in and on skunk cabbage, with some species actually building a web right across the opening. So that's something I look for. There was a place where I always found it when I drove my kids to the high school when they were still that young. And so I knew where it was going to be, and I found it up as early as December one year. Wild leeks. They emerge early and have a distinct onion-like odor. Flowers appear after the leaves have withered in early summer. Both leaves and bulbs are edible. Now, this is kind of cool. This word here, Chicago. I see this in a lot of publications. Legend says a Midwest Indian tribe named a place crowded with this plant, Chicago, or skunk place. The area was eventually settled, and the Indian term anglicized to Chicago. I don't know if that's true, but for tonight, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Now, just a sight of this, the state of Vermont fought so much of this that on their state quarter, there's a sugar bush on the back of it. I love this picture. Tat normally begins sometime in late February, early March, when the weather strikes a balance between the changing seasons. Cool nights and warm days get the sap moving. I have a buddy who's a physics teacher at the high school, still a teacher at the high school I used to teach at, and he just told me the other day he put the taps in and started collecting syrup this year on January 20th. And his first boil was February 1st. I guess it all depends. Maple syrup boiled from sap is a perfect way of celebrating the new growing season. Even with the snow on the ground there, you can't help but feel hopeful when you see that. And help you endure. Okay, this is Cole's foot. I find it blooming early and in the most incredibly unnutritious spots. It thrives in places that are nutrient poor, often mistaken for dandelions. The flowers appear before the leaves. You see this in early spring. I see the long roadsides and waste places. Uh, the leaves, hairy and white underneath, were thought to resemble a colt's foot, hence the common name. This one here is my favorite, hepatica. When the earliest flowers in bloom, it comes in white, pink, blue, and lavender. It's called liver leaf due to the leaves' resemblance to the three-lobed mammalian liver. And that signature that herb doctors use the plant to treat liver ailments. Most of you, I would be very surprised if you weren't aware of the doctrine of signatures, that early belief by herbalists that if a part of a plant resembled a part of a human body, it was God's way of telling humanity to use that part of the plant for that part of the body, that plant for that part of the body. Even to the point where I read where if it was in the upper part of the plant, it was meant to treat ailments of the upper body. If it was in the middle part of the plant, it was meant to treat ailments in the middle part of the body. And if it was in the lower part of the plant, it was meant to treat ailments there. It's a real beautiful early blooming flower. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. If you like wet places, marsh marigold's your flower. Grows in marshes and other wet situations. The gold sepals provide guide for insects by reflecting ultraviolet light from all parts of the flower except the very center. Leaves eaten when cooked, buds boiled and eaten, even pickled in some places. And I see this. There's a real wet spot on 5 and 20 between Canandaigua and Geneva, and I look for this every spring, and I see that yellow coming. Trout lily is another one I look for. Time of bloom combined with mottled leaf pattern reminds some markings of on some trout, hence the name. I read that if undisturbed, they form huge colonies that live for centuries. And the real cool thing about this plant is their seeds have little attachments, fatty attachments that ants love, and they take underground and they either eat them or feed them to their larvae and discard the seeds on their compost piles and essentially disperse the seeds. Now, there's a name for that, and I have asked my son's friend, who was an entomologist, what they call that, and I'm getting a lot of different pronunciation. Myrmecockery, Myrmecocori, and on it goes. I don't know the right way, but it's a cool kind of thing. When you talk about seed dispersal by wind and animal and water, and now ants. Wild ginger. Another plant I look for, this jug-shaped maroon flower can be found at ground level with its two heart-shaped leaves meet. The flower is located where carrion flies and beetles are likely to find it, offering both pollen and shelter to the early emerging insects. And like the seeds of hepatica, violet, bloodroot, and many other wildflowers, ginger seeds also have that fatty deposits attached to them. And if you have just crush that stem, you get that ginger-like odor. Spring beauties. Real harbinger of the spring, these beauties close at night and on cloudy or stormy days when pollinating insects aren't flying to protect their pollen from rain and dew. I'll move along here. Shadbush, also called serviceberry, also called Juneberry. Shadbush, so named when the shad were moving upstream to spawn. Serviceberry, some texts say, so called because it was a time when colonists could plant the dead who had died during the weather, and the ground was actually able to be worked, or Juneberry because its berries ripen in June. But I love driving on the roadsides, and it's a leafless woods, and you see these white blossoms, and it's a very nice sign of hope, as is wild cherry for the same reasons. And lest we forget, right? What sign of spring would be, what list of signs of spring would be incomplete without these guys, right? The buds of pussy willow flowers are starting to open, a sure sign of seasonal change. The soft silver hairs that insulate the emerging spike of flowers within a willow flower bud. The hairs trap the sun's heat, promoting the development of the pollen, or if it's a female bud, the ovules of the flower deep within the hairs. Some people put this in different colored water and the plant takes it up and you have different colored pussyballs. One last one in the plant world, jelly fungi. On a recent trip with my young birders, we ran across this. It can be very hard when dry, but when it's got some moisture, it can feel really jelly-like as it responds to the moisture. Comes in several colors with the orange and yellow form, sometimes called witch's butter. Some of the earliest fungi seen in the spring when revived with melting snow or winter thaw. And we saw that, we said, okay. Some insects, morning cloak butterfly, they spend the winter as adults, so they're out early. I've seen them in March floating around. But this picture I took last spring on the Ontario County Pathways, when I saw one early in the spring, and it was really tattered. And very often in the spring, having spent the winter under bark or under logs or in cracks in a wall, they can be really, really tattered and the worse for wear, but they're still a nice sign. This is a Kama, early spring, another early spring butterfly. Overwinters adults, can be seen in woods feeding on tree sap, mud, scat, and decaying organic matter. And they're so called because if you can see this little white line on the underside of the wing, which is why they're called that, and very hard to see when they're resting like that. They look like a leaf to me. Okay, this is a little bit later, but I love it because it's so beautiful. It's a spring azure. It doesn't come out as early as the other two because it doesn't spend the winter as an adult. It spends the winter as a pupa, but I'm told it is the first butterfly to emerge that has spent the winter as a pupa. Okay, real quick on to the frogs. We are doing surveys at the refuge in March. Last fall, they stopped breathing and their hearts stopped beating as they prepared for 2 to 3 months of hibernation. The heart lungs now resume activity as they thaw and emerge from hibernation to gather at woodland pools to court, mate, and lay eggs. And in March, we're hearing this all over the refuge in the swamp. Lots and lots of duck-like quacks, and of course, they got that mass that looks like a bandit. This guy, spring peeper. Who doesn't wait to hear the sound of them? I remember being a student in Antioch, New England, and living at Willard Pond Wildlife Sanctuary run by New Hampshire Audubon, and we'd come home at night, and the sound of these guys would be deafening. It's one of the official heralds of the spring here in the peeper chorus. Tree frog, great. Like wood frogs and peepers, they survive the winter by confining ice formation to the outside of cells while using protective measures to keep water inside the cells from freezing. They can change color from grayish to greenish depending on temperature, humidity, and the color of the surroundings. We know them by their brief bird-like trilling that can last for several seconds. One last thing. Amphibians of the spring night. Go with a flashlight to a deserted road near a woodland pool on the first rainy night of spring to see some migrating amphibians emerging from hibernation and heading for water to mate and lay eggs. They love moist conditions, which is why they prefer migrating on rainy nights. Species include, but are not limited to, wood frogs, spring peepers, spotted salamanders, and blue spotted salamanders. To finish an Antioch story, a couple weeks after the conservation officer stopped us when we were watching the woodcock, he encountered a group of Antioch students on a rainy night watching the amphibian migration. And he pulled up in his car and he said, "All right, what you guys up to?" And he said, "Well, we're watching the annual spring migration of the amphibians." And he kind of chuckled and said, "I believe anything. I caught a couple guys last week watching woodcock nuptial flight." And when the students told each other that, we all had a good laugh. Lest we forget, early in the spring at the refuge, when we're doing surveys, we're likely to see these guys sunning themselves. They can spend up to 4 months buried in mud at the bottom of a stream or pond. Among the earliest reptiles to emerge from hibernation, can often be seen in ponds on sunny days, basking on rocks or logs like we see in the Montezuma. Are known to form stacks when sunning spots are scarce. Can be extremely wary, dropping from their perch into water at the hint of danger from a predator like a skunk, fox, raccoon, or someone in a kayak. Colorful, heartening to see them. So I'm on my second to last slide here. I began with a poem and I want to end with a poem. A poem by Robert Frost called The Onset. I love him ever since I was introduced to him in high school. I've actually written a play about him, and I perform a play, 1 hour play as him, with 20 some odd poems in it. So if ever you're interested, email me off list, okay? But this, he loved to say that a poem is something that, uh, uh, how did he say? It begins in delight and it ends in wisdom. So I want you to see if you can see the wisdom in this poem. It's a man walking out. Winter hasn't begun, but all of a sudden he encounters the very first snow of the season. And it's kind of depressing at first, but look for the wisdom in it. Okay, so here we go. I'll read it to you. Always the same when on a faded night, at last the gathered snow lets down as white as may be in dark woods. It with a song it shall not make again all winter long, of hissing on the yet uncovered ground. I almost stumble looking up and round, as one who, overtaken by the end, gives up his errand and lets death descend upon him where he is, with nothing done to evil, no important triumph won, more than if life had never begun. Yet all the precedent is on my side. I know that winter death has never tried the earth, but it has failed. The snow may heap in long storms, and undrifted 4 feet deep is measured against maple, birch, and oak. It cannot check the peeper's silver croak. And I shall see the snow all go downhill in water of a slender April rill that flashes tail through last year's weathered break and dead weeds like a disappearing snake. Nothing will be left white, but here a birch, and there a clump of houses with a church. Begins in delight and ends in wisdom. I hope you got some wisdom out of it. This last slide will show you the wisdom I got out of it. Take heart, life always finds a way. Now, these aren't my snowdrops, but my snowdrops are blooming. So, in the next weeks and so, I encourage you, I'm sure most of you do, I know I do, and I know a lot of naturalists do, you go out and just check. There's many signs nature is giving us that things are slowly changing, maybe not as fast as we want, but slowly changing. They're all heartening, and it gives you hope and helps you be patient that warmer days are ahead. So that's the presentation.
Thank you, Pete. That was wonderful. And I, for one, am very interested in the play, so I'll email.
Oh, beautiful! Yeah, I performed it for the Geneva Theater Guild, and I'm going to be doing it in Rochester and in Port Byron. It's there's a woman who did Emily Dickinson, and I did Frost, and it's really cool.
Oh, nice. So you have times coming up soon?
Well, the one I'm doing it at a private dinner theater in early March, and I'm still waiting to hear when the dates are in Rochester. We did it already in early December in Geneva, 3 nights.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It was cool. We usually get, for a straight play in this neck of the woods, if we're lucky, we get 15 or 20 people. So we set up 20 chairs and 90 people came.
Whoa.
Yeah, we were really,
fantastic.
so yeah, we were just flabbergasted. So it was nice.
Yes. Well, thank you for all of this. And I hope you enjoy seeing the cranes. Does anybody have any questions? Or a lot of nice comments in the chat box? I was wondering, Pete, if that picture of the grouse was yours, or if it was.
No, it isn't. No.
Okay, because I thought I saw a morel in front of that log.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I wasn't sure, but I was thinking it looked like a morel.
Oh, boy. I don't know my mushrooms, so I don't know. Let me just go back through my little notes here and see.
And I'm definitely going to take, I just finished for the class that I teach in the spring, winter ecology module. And so I'm definitely going to use the information that you gave on the great horned owl and the incubation temperatures. So
yeah, it's incredible. It's yeah, the breeding bird atlas just shows different first eggs, first hatchling, first nestlings. It's pretty cool. Pretty. They must be pretty. In fact, I've read where if they kill something to eat, and it's too much to eat at once, they'll set it aside and it'll freeze, and they'll incubate the dead body just to warm it up so they can eat it again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Huh,
so I guess there must be really, really good at that.
that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, well, lots of great comments in the chat, and I will send them to you, Pete. Thank you
Thank you.
again.
Yep.
I'm hoping to make it up to Montezuma sometime this spring, so I'll be in touch to find
Yep.
out what's happening there when I
Yeah,
do.
definitely. Yeah, yeah, good, good.